Magic, white and black, the science of finite and infinite life. If we pass through the streets of a city, the images of men and women pass review in our mind while their bodies meet our own. But for the images which they produce within our consciousness, we would know nothing about their existence. The images produced in the mind come to the consciousness whose seat is the brain. If man's consciousness were centered in some other part of his body, he would become conscious in that part of the sensations which he receives. He might, for instance, see with his stomach or hear with his fingers, as has been actually the case in some somnambulic states. From the relations existing between object and subject, physical senses came into existence. There could be no perception without resistance. If our bodies were perfectly transparent to light, we could not perceive the light, because light cannot illuminate itself. The astral light penetrates our bodies, but we are not able to see it with our physical eyes, because the physical body offers no resistance to it. But when the physical body begins to sleep, and life retires from the outer into the inner man, the astral man may become conscious of the existence of that higher light and see it like beautiful stars or sheets of light, resembling the electric light falling through a crystal globe. At the time when we fall asleep, consciousness gradually leaves its seat in the brain and merges into the consciousness of the inner man. It may then begin to realize another state of existence, and if a part of the consciousness still remains with the brain, the perception of the inner consciousness may come to the cognizance of the lower personal self. We may therefore, in that half-conscious state, between sleeping and waking, when our consciousness is, so to say, oscillating between two states of existence, receive important revelations from the higher state and retain them in the memory of the external self. The more our consciousness merges in that higher state, the better will we realize the higher existence, but the impressions upon our personal self will become dim and perhaps not be remembered. But as long as the greatest part of our consciousness is active within the material brain, the perceptions of the higher state will only be dim and mixed up with memories and sensations of the lower state of existence. The images will be confused. When the turmoil of external life ceases and the external senses come to rest, then is the time for the inner senses to become more active, and then the neophyte may enjoy communion with his master, the divine Adonai. Then may he receive lessons from the world of the Spirit, and problems that were too difficult for him to be solved, while his external senses were fully alive, may now become clear to him in his sleep, and even be remembered when he awakens again to external life. The tranquility of the outer senses facilitates the action of the inner senses. It is said of Socrates that he once stood for 18 hours immovable and absorbed in thought, but in the fully illuminated seer, the external and internal consciousness are as one. Jacob Boehmer was in a state of divine illumination for 3 weeks and followed during that time his occupation as a shoemaker. Life, sensation, perception and consciousness may be withdrawn from the physical body and become active in the astral body of man. The astral man may then become conscious of his own existence independent of the physical body and develop his faculties of sense. He may then see sights which have no existence for the physical eye. He may hear sounds that the physical ear cannot hear. He may feel, taste and smell things whose existence the physical senses cannot realize and which consequently have no existence to them. What an astonishing sight would meet the eyes of a mortal if the veil that mercifully hides the astral world from his sight were to be suddenly removed. He would see the space which he inhabits occupied by a different world full of inhabitants, of whose existence he knew nothing. What before appeared to him dense and solid would now seem to be shadowy, and what seemed to him like airspace he would find peopled with life. All houses are haunted, but not all persons are equally able to see the ghosts that haunt them, because to perceive things on the astral plane requires the development of a sense adapted to such perceptions. Thoughts are ghosts, and only those that can see thoughts can see ghosts, unless the latter are sufficiently materialized to refract the light and to become visible to the eye. We may feel the presence of an astral form without being able to see it, and be just as certain of its presence as if we did behold it with our eyes. For the sense of feeling is not less reliable than the sense of sight. The presence of a holy, high and exalted idea that enters the mind fills it with a feeling of happiness, with an exhilarating influence whose vibrations may be perceived long after that thought has gone. Each human being may be looked upon as an unlimited sphere of consciousness with a visible center. Each resembles a living nebula, of which only the solid kernel is visible. Visible man is not all there is of man, but surrounded by an invisible mental atmosphere comparable to the pulp surrounding the seed in a fruit. But this light or atmosphere or pulp is the mind of man, an organized ocean of spiritual substance wherein all things exist. If man were conscious of his own greatness, he would know that within himself exists the sun and the moon and the starry sky and every object in space, because his true self is God and God is without limits. To see a thing is identical with feeling it with the mind. The mind of man extends through space. It is therefore not merely the images of things we see, but the things themselves that exist within the periphery of our mind, however distant from the center of our consciousness they may be. And if we were able to shift that center from one place to another within the sphere of the mind, we might, in a moment of time approach to the object of our perception. If you throw a handful of sand into a quiet lake, does not every grain form a centre of motion upon the surface, from whence proceed concentric waves in all directions? Can you tell where the realm of one such motion is limited, and do they not all move in the same lake? Likewise, each individual being constitutes a centre of consciousness in the sea of eternity, whose ripples of thought extend into the depths of the infinite mind. As it is, the centre of consciousness of normally constituted man is located in the brain, and if the mind feels an object, the impressions have to travel all the way to the brain. If we look at a distant star, our mind is actually there and in contact with it, and if we could transfer our consciousness to that place of contact, we would be ourselves upon that star and perceive the objects thereon as if we were standing personally upon its surface.